can be a slippery slope very quickly.
I think it's something you're seeing now more than ever.
I definitely think it's like a pretty crazy concept in most other professions.
They'll be thinking, how do you expect me to do this?
So thanks so much for joining us today, Maria. We're really excited to have you on the podcast and to have a really cool discussion with you. So you graduated with your law degree in 2017, and now you've gone on to working into a really large, successful law firm. But your journey to getting to the stage has actually probably been more difficult than it is for some. In a post you wrote on LinkedIn, you shared an article from New Zealand Herald titled "Want to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, don't grow up poor," which really highlighted how deeply inequality runs and kind of the real impact that it has on opportunity. I know this is kind of jumping right in the deep end, but can you share a bit about the reality of like this uphill battle?
Yeah, it's a strange one, because I think when I think about when I posted that kind of was like a lot of, I guess, my friends that's kind of like not new, you know, it was like, oh, this is really strange that there's been a whole article on it, because it's kind of just been the reality. And it's not to say that, you know, not everyone has these struggles. You know, law school is hard for the best of us, right? Like for me, it was super isolating. But, you know, I was coming from a background where I didn't know any other lawyers. There were no other lawyers in my family. I did like not even family friends. So even just the idea of going into a career that I'd really never seen mapped out, and I guess my idea of what a lawyer were like, you know, from American TV shows, and obviously, I mean, unless like I'm talking about friggin' Meghan Markle and Suits, like, you know, the idea of doing commercial law in a law firm I just could not see myself doing that. So I guess like growing up, it was just mum and I, and she always had high expectations of what I wanted to do, but I think the jump, especially from high school to university, feels really big. I was lucky enough to kind of get a scholarship in high school to be able to go to a private school. And obviously without that opportunity, I wouldn't have, I guess, had the confidence and been around other people who do have friends and family or connections already in the industry or know people in that way. So it kind of became the standard, and so I didn't think about it in a different way. But I know when that's not your reality day to day, it can feel really disconnecting. And I think, like I said to you, Ella, when we first caught up, like when I was at law school, I didn't resonate at all with any of the content, with any of the stories. Like I honestly, my grades were terrible because I barely went to class, but it's a whole other thing. But there was just nothing about what I was like being taught, or just that setup, that made me feel like comfortable or at home, or not like I'm sort of the other or marginalized. So I guess if I was speaking to people who felt that way, or students coming through law school, I would say one of the most important things for me was really finding kind of my people, my really close tribe of people who, because and you both know this as much as I do, like when you are at law school, you see people at law school way more than you see, I guess, your family or your partner or that kind of thing, and they become such massive influences in your life. And I genuinely would not be in the position that I am now if it wasn't for having people alongside me to make me feel like I wasn't alone in that space. So yeah, definitely a kind of different journey to getting to where I am now. But I'm glad it happened that way, because I think maybe the imposter syndrome would have been even more massive if I kind of went straight from uni into a space like I am now. So that's a very roundabout way to answer it, but it's just, it's an odd one. I don't want people to think that, you know, that I was defined by the struggle or something like that. It was just, it's a big jump, and I think people don't necessarily understand that. when you are in the industry. We've got summer clerks coming through as well, and even just being in a new building and having a building where there's a receptionist at the front, and like that's a massive jump from where you are as a student, and we tend to forget that as we keep working. So yeah, it's just encouraging people to be a little bit more inclusive around that kind of difference.
So what led you into actually studying law then?
Oh yeah, what made me say, look, I was terrible at maths, and I wasn't super argumentative, but I fancied myself like, I always felt like I was like old, I'm like, oh, I can go one-on-one with adults. So I love to argue with like my uncles and things like that. So I always liked English, reading and writing. So it kind of was like, I never had my heart set on it, but it felt like it made the most sense for what my strengths were. And so it really fell into it and got too far in to get out.
And so you mentioned kind of that when you were studying, you felt like maybe you're looking forward to looking ahead to kind of a potentially isolating profession. What has the reality of working as a lawyer turned out compared to your earlier perception, like in your later years of law school?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, I wouldn't say the reality of it is leaps and bounds away from what I imagined it, but I think you get better at navigating that space. I was not a good, I still don't think I'm a very good public speaker, not super confident talking to people, and that kind of grew as my career went on. And I think I've been really lucky in my the short career that I've had to date to have some people who've really championed me in spaces and spoken my name in spaces that wouldn't have happened necessarily if I was just kind of going it alone. So I've really got to, I guess, acknowledge, and I'm deeply grateful for the people who've done that for me. And I guess my only hope is being able to do that for others going forward as well. So I think the legal industry has its challenges. I'm not going to lie, and I've had to learn, and I think it's something, not even just being Pacific, but as women, or I guess being really intentional about my boundaries, which is really hard because I feel often that I need to say yes, and that's a pressure that I put on myself, and so it's very difficult for me to kind of say no without anything else, because I always feel like I'm letting somebody down. So that's been something I've been really grateful to have, I guess, some female lawyers a little bit further on in their career to kind of impart that wisdom on me, because it's probably something they've also struggled with as well. So I'm getting better at it, still not great, but yeah, the boundaries thing is really important. And obviously sometimes it's about kind of protecting your peace, and especially around sometimes the cultural load that comes with being, I guess, a minority in a predominantly Pākehā male environment, can come with its own challenges. So the boundaries are really important for me, and something I try to encourage, I guess, younger Pacific women and Pacific students who come through the ranks to protect that going through their career, because it can be a slippery slope very, very quickly.
So it sounds like from your time at university throughout to your journey now to your current position at Minter Ellison Radbots, you've been both a mentor and a mentee. Did you actively seek out these mentoring experiences, or is it something that naturally evolved through things you'd been a part of?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I was like, I still think I'm a super shy person. It's not natural for me to reach out to somebody to be like, hey, can you be my mentor? I think the students that I've seen or I've had interactions with, recently and coming through, are so much more confident than I ever was, which is awesome. But I I didn't actively seek out mentors, and I definitely wouldn't encourage it exactly, but I think what I would say is I think as my personal confidence kind of grew, as I got out of uni, went into my first grad job, kind of realized that, actually practicing law and studying law are two very different things. And the practicing side of things, like, kind of clicks for me, like, this is something I could do, speaks to my strengths, what I'm able to do, what I'm able to build relationships around. And I guess I think I began really showing up in and speaking out in a kind of authentic way, in a way that I very much pride myself on not saying something without having thought it through. I think people close to me would probably agree that when I do choose to say something, I've thought about it or reflected on it for quite a bit. So when I have sort of shared, there have been parts of, I guess, what I have shared that have resonated with some people, and in that way, kind of, I've evolved into having mentors. But I don't think it happens that way for everyone. And I think the further I've gone along in my career, I would encourage people to seek out mentors, and don't go for the chair of the board or something. There is amazing relationships and mentors who are your colleagues, your friends, students. I learned so much from younger people. Gosh, that makes me sound really old. But like, there is so much learning and relationships and strength from being able to connect with people at different stages of their life. And I think you come across way more authentic in that way. And the people who are meant to find you will find you. And I think that's kind of how it's happened for me. So that's kind of my only nugget of mentoring advice, I'd say.
Yeah, I really agree with you on finding mentors that perhaps aren't the chair, or I found that people that are in even completely different industries provide such a good perspective to the things you might be facing at a time.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's one of the things I think I spoke to Ella about, that I love about being kind of getting into governance and working with people who aren't lawyers. And we think in a very particular way. I didn't really realize that until, I guess, working with other people who don't think quite as, I guess, strictly as the way that we kind of plan our arguments. And that has been really encouraging, and I've been really grateful to have people like that around me and supporting me in my career as well. So yeah, I definitely would encourage people to kind of spread their network a little wider than what they initially think is of value.
Yeah. And so when you left university, you chose to work in-house for your first job, which might not be the typical path for a lot of law graduates, and might be actually quite comforting to hear for law students who might not be interested in pursuing jobs at large law firms. Can you explain your thought process behind your decision and how it's impacted your career?
I'm not fresh out of law school, but at the time when I was at law school, and in particular the law school that I did go to, it felt very much, and I guess, you know as well as I do, the careers kind of days and what was being promoted and the marketing was very much gave me the sense that, like, to have a successful legal career, you're going to have to do, your summer clerk at a large law firm, get a clerkship position, do your 2 years minimum, and that's how you're going to be a successful lawyer. There's no way around that. And I think I spoke to Ella, and I sort of have shared a little bit already. Law school was just super isolating. I just didn't resonate. I didn't connect with any of the content. My grades were terrible. I enjoyed myself. University is so much fun. I highly encourage people to enjoy it as much as possible. But law school itself, I think in about end of second year, start of third year, I really said, like, I don't think being a lawyer is for me. I think I'll go into policy or doing something different like that. And one of my friends at the time, she had interned in-house at Auckland Council, and not even in the legal team, and I think in their people and performance team. And she was the one who told me, oh, I think the people there are really lovely, and I think you'd really get on with them. It might be worthwhile to check if they have a grad program. And I think one of the important things I would say if people are listening from the industry is like, if it wasn't for my friend who I know who looks and sounds like me, kind of giving me that type of shot, this I probably would never would have happened, right? And so saw there was a grad program, chucked my name in the hat. I loved the idea of, again, not working with just lawyers. I figured, council's a big organization. I'll be able to work with tons of different people, and kind of fell into that position. And then I got the job, was so grateful to have a job. I was, those kind of like last year dreads where you're like, oh my gosh, I need to have my life sorted out. I don't want to be unemployed when I leave uni. So got the job, and at Auckland Council, they have a graduate program, because I was really surprised they have quite a large legal team. I think at the time it's maybe around 60 or so people. So comparable to, I'd say, like a mid-sized law firm. And was able to rotate in the 4 different teams. And I just loved it. I really enjoyed it. Everyone in the team were like incredible lawyers, all had large law firm experience. And I just loved the opportunity to learn, and the practice of law and the problem solving stuff. It just felt really resonated with me way more. It felt real. I could actually see it out, like Auckland Council touches on almost everything. I was very much, it's a local government, they do bins and rates, that's it. Like most Aucklanders, but there was so much interesting work, and landed in the litigation team, and had just some really great people who championed me. I had some incredible managers who were really supportive of kind of all of my endeavors outside of working as well. And I think also because of all of those lawyers' past experience, kind of both in commercial law firms, offshore, that kind of thing, and their priorities being at Auckland Council were slightly different, it really gave me like a rounded perspective of what a career might look like. And so being able to grow in that confidence, I think really was a perfect platform for me to consider, what the next step would look like. And I would say I think I'm a better lawyer now for having that experience, because I think one thing in-house lawyers have a real knack for, or you have to build, is the understanding of how does our legal advice feed into the way this business is run. What does this have to do with the overall strategy or the vision of the organization? How does this fit in with business plans? How does this fit? What's ideal and what's going to make the most sense for this situation? And I don't think I would have built that muscle if I went straight in as a summer clerk. Not to say that I think that makes anyone lesser of a lawyer, but I really enjoyed that. And I think when I got to the law firm that I am at now, I wasn't kind of overawed by the experience. By that time I had done plenty of work with large law firms as external counsel. So I kind of, again, built that muscle, built that confidence. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm starstruck in this space. And so I could just kind of get my feet on the floor and hit the ground running. So I think if there are any law students or people who are considering in-house, or they think, oh, I'm too young, or I'm too junior to do it, I think in-house is growing. That market is massive. In Australia, it's massive. In other jurisdictions, it's huge, and it's providing a lot of opportunity. And I started with 3 other graduates at Auckland Council, and now we've all gone transitioned into new roles. I think all of us have gone to the largest law firms. So it is definitely a great opportunity. And I don't have any bad things to say. I also stay really connected with my colleagues there, and just incredible group of people. So yeah, couldn't recommend it enough.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear the perspective of someone who has gone in-house. And I'm curious, how did you know it was the right time to start looking at other options or transitioning to private practice to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any, I wasn't set in my mind that, okay, after this, I want to go to private practice. That wasn't how it worked out at all. I kind of had got to, I'd say maybe the 3-year mark from memory. And I was thinking to myself, I really enjoy it here. I think I'm still learning. Am I comfortable or am I complacent? And I'm very much a person who likes to be very stable. I don't like taking leaps of faith. If anyone knows me, I'm such a Taurus in that way. Like, it takes a lot for me to chuck myself into the deep end to something. So I think in that situation, like a mentor or someone you feel really comfortable to share and just bounce ideas off was really useful for me. So I kind of shared that with a mentor, and I said, I've just kind of been thinking about whether this might be good for my career. And I think I kind of landed on thinking to myself that I think I'm up for a new challenge. I'm up to, I think there's a lot more that I could learn elsewhere, and this would be a good time to do it. So yeah, it wasn't like I had my 5-10 year map planned out. Absolutely not. I didn't even think I'd be a lawyer. So it was just being open to the opportunity, bouncing ideas off somebody I trusted, somebody who I knew had the experience transitioning into new roles, given they'd probably been in the same position a few years prior. So I think if you're in a place that either, and not to say this was my experience at council, but I think if you're at a place where you think to yourself, I've learned what I need to learn, I think I'm up for a new challenge, I think it's just time for me to see what else is there and try something new, then I'd highly encourage it. So yeah, I think it's just kind of, it really, really helped me to talk to somebody who could just help me articulate my thoughts in a way that made sense.
Yeah, it's definitely like when you write something down and talk about it, it makes it make a lot more sense in your head. Yeah. And so you touched on some of the skills that you had from your in-house experience, was like understanding the strategies of the business and what's going on in the business as a whole. When you went to private practice, were there any new skills that you found that you had to learn when you got there compared to your time in-house?
Yeah. I often get asked, like, which was harder? Did you enjoy in-house more? Do you enjoy private practice more? I think each have their own challenges. Private practice, the pace is different. There's no understating that. It's a really different pace. You're kind of rolling through, and obviously you're working with multiple clients. And which one thing I really love about, doing the job that I do now is because you work with multiple clients and at the pace, the cadence that we do, you kind of pick up your best position to pick up trends and to kind of scan, your suite of clients, especially comparable ones, and reflect on, actually, this would be really useful for X client to know because we've been sort of dealing with it with, ABC clients, which I think, again, is a muscle that you don't necessarily build in-house because you're really dialing into, what makes sense for our organization, what makes sense for our internal clients. But I really like that kind of zooming out activity. And I think it's probably something I've picked up from my partner, is that ability to look across our clients, look across what we're dealing with, and but actually build off my skills from in-house. So I think another one that I've really tailored kind of in this role was also like seeing through, I guess, sometimes often the quite distinct differences between what a client says they want versus what a client actually needs, and being able to kind of wade through content, information, meetings, all of that stuff to recognize that. I think that's something that you pick up quite quickly in-house, and is quite a skill to kind of understand if you've only been in a private practice situation. So that's something I think I've very much leveraged from my in-house practice into this role. In terms of other skills during private practice, I guess the pace is the one. It really kind of, it makes you have to think quickly, assess quickly, and back yourself a little bit more. I don't know if I'm articulating myself, but you kind of really build an instinct because of how quickly you're doing things and because of how many of people you're working with, that kind of gut feeling. And maybe it's just because we're women and we're just superior, but that gut feeling is something that maybe I'd say 4 years ago I didn't trust as much as I do now. And I think being in the environment that I am in now, and what I would encourage others, and especially young women coming up the rank, is like, if you have a gut feeling something's off, or something could be added, or there's a different way to go about something, I'd say 9 times out of 10, you're probably on the right track, and it's worthwhile bringing up, and it's worthwhile saying something. So yeah, that kind of intuition bit has been something I've really honed in on in the space that I am in now.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And so you've had experience now in in-house and private practice, and law is generally a career that people are in for sometimes their whole life. How do you see your career evolving over the foreseeable future?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I was saying to Ella when we caught up last week, I'm not a big goals person. And people might just say I'm like lazy, but let's flip that around. I just think, especially just how my career's panned out, is that it's just all about being open to the opportunities, and obviously being real intentional, short term. But my career has really turned left in ways that I didn't anticipate when I first set out, and I think having the faith to know that in a new transition you'll always land on your feet has really helped me be open to the new opportunities that come next. I think the other thing in terms of what I see, how I see my career panning out, I think I would say I would want to continue looking for and being open to opportunities that I think is worthwhile for me learning more in. I think I know me, and I need new challenges. I need to be uncomfortable to progress. And this is not even in just my career, this is in my life. And so sometimes the scary thing is the exact thing that you need to do in the time. I moved from my previous job in Auckland to Wellington within the space of 3 or 4 weeks. And that was all organized within the space of a few days. So life can switch very quickly. And it's just not being afraid to have faith in yourself. And also, like you said, like a legal career is very long. I don't know whether in the next 5 years' time I will continue to be a lawyer. I don't know whether life will take me on a different path, but I think I at least want to continue going forward, ensuring that I'm still learning, ensuring that I still enjoy what I do, and ensure that I'm still being authentic to, I guess, what's important to me. And I think I said to Ella in the previous job, and something I really admire, I guess, about my current partner is that she's always been very clear, and I think I've always been very clear that, at the end of the day, being a lawyer is my job. It's not the balance of who I am. It's not the entirety of my identity. There are so many important things in my life and so many important people and communities and initiatives that I want to get involved in that work outside of my day job. And those are just as important, if not more important, than what a career looks like. And it's something I'm learning more and more, and trying to balance more and more. So hoping that, if we were to have this conversation in 10 years' time, I'm enjoying what I do, I'm enjoying my time with my family, and I'm still having fun. Because gosh, life's too long to, other way around, life's too short to be miserable in a job. It's no fun at all.
That's really great advice, actually. Like a really cool perspective, and maybe one that's actually not that common. As I mentioned like earlier, you share like often on LinkedIn about your experiences in the legal profession as well, very honestly, positive and negative, and something that's really engaging about them, not just the subject matter, of course, but is that you're really transparent. And a lot of people are discussing in the legal industry more and more issues such as diversity and inclusion. And but what do you think when people are discussing topics such as these that are difficult, but sort of not addressing things directly, or kind of jumping around like the actual situation?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think maybe when I was 19, I would have jumped down people's necks for things, and maybe I've got soft, or in the last few years I might have matured, I guess, in terms of my approach. Or I just think there have been times that I think a lot of people just need to feel the safety to be able to share things, and sometimes, and with I guess the sort of prejudice and the, what's the word, I guess not realizing a side which feels very obvious to other people. Sometimes they just need to be able to kind of think that through, and I think I'm well positioned to kind of help people along that journey. I think one of my strengths, and something that people have said to me, when they've seen something that I've written, or I've shared something, has been my ability to kind of, like you said, be transparent and be candid, but in a way that kind of invites people along in a safe way to kind of reflect on how maybe like, I wouldn't have thought about that in the way that you've articulated that, or it wouldn't have occurred to me that would have been a super traumatic experience for somebody, which I think goes a really long way. And I'm no activist by any stretch of the imagination, but I think activism comes in very many forms, and there are people on the front of picket lines, and there are people who are writing letters to government, and there are people who are just having those kind of tough conversations and within their families, within their communities. There are all these little pieces that I think all contribute to people being, I guess, more inclusive and more open to people's views and thoughts and ideas that are different to theirs. And it's all really important. It's just, I guess, for me, I've kind of found what works, what feels safest for me. I feel most comfortable when I write. I feel most comfortable when I have the time to articulate my thoughts and bring together something that makes sense for me to read. And I never share things like when I wrote, for example, that my like article on being profiled at court, it wasn't about coming down on the person that racially profiled me at court. It wasn't at all. It was just me navigating kind of the array of emotions that I had gone through in that piece. And I'm very much the kind of person, and I think it's something I get from my mum, was being able to write that down, figure like, yep, no, I was angry and I was sad and I was disappointed, but I still feel inspired. Like I said, I still have a job to do. I still feel empowered to do that job. I have supporters and I have champions who are great about empowering me and making me feel comfortable to share that information and being able to use my platform in that way. I know it's not the same for everyone else. And so where I can do it, I'll do it. But then again, I'll go offline for like 6 months and not write anything on LinkedIn. And it's just more so navigating the ebbs and flows of how I feel in that space. But yeah, it's one of those things. If you asked me last week, it might be different. If you ask me this week, it might be different. It's just, I think if I was to encourage people who want to know how to better support and people who might not be the majority in their workplaces, in their communities, that kind of thing, just be listening. Listening's great. Supporting's great. That's where it starts. And being open to discussing, opening your heart, opening your mind to those conversations, because they can be super uncomfortable, but it's taking it with a grain of salt and knowing that, my colleagues probably been uncomfortable in these spaces their whole life. So, the least I can do is sit in this conversation, sit in the uncomfortable for a little bit and see the way that I can help and be a true ally.
What do you think would be the biggest, the things that would have the biggest impact on kind of getting to the root of the problem? Like, where would you say to start?
I think the start is to assume you have blind spots. I think a lot of people come from the assumption, and it's almost harder to engage with and have conversations with people who already think that they have no blind sides, that they're inherently good people, that they inherently do not have biases, that they do not see the world in a certain way, that they do not see things in a certain way. And I say that for myself as well. I have blind spots that I miss out. I have my own privileges. And so I think coming from a place that you assume that you already have blind spots is massive, because I don't know how many conversations I've been in with people, with friends who've had to deal. It's like trying to explain to a brick wall, the sky is blue. The sky is blue for you, I understand, but it's been grey for me for ages. And they just like, what do you mean the sky is blue? Like, that's a terrible analogy, but it's I think, and it's an uncomfortable conversation and an uncomfortable reflection to have within yourself. It's really hard. And you have to balance that with, obviously, like, don't get stuck in the feeling bad bit. Like, I love that people want to support me. I love when people respond to what I share, my reflections, that kind of thing. But I don't need I'm sorry. I don't need people to apologize. I don't need you to feel bad about yourself. It actually doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't progress. It doesn't shift the dial at all. So I think identifying your blind spots, accepting that your assumption that you don't have blind spots is incorrect. And also just going off and doing the work yourself. Go do your research, go Google things. And one thing I will say is don't ask that the person in your firm or the person in your organization to teach you these things. They might do it, but it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And this is a terrible analogy too, but it's like, being the youngest person on the floor and always being asked, like, how do you convert this into a PDF? Or that's not your job. And that's not my job. It's part of my values, and sometimes I am in a position to share that, and I do want to shift the dial a little bit. And there are other times where I'm like, no, I just kind of want to do my job. I want to get my emails out and go home. So yeah, I think that would have the most impact. And they're tiny little things. I'm not asking you to go out here and, stand in front of Parliament. We don't need that. There are so many impactful things that people can do every day that shift the dial going forward.
I think it's a really important thing you brought up about always going to the one person in your firm and asking them something you want to learn? Because I've definitely observed that, and I understand how
Yes.
it could get very tiring. And previously, I've been in environments where terms like diversity hire have been thrown around, which is quite horrible and discredits all the hard work and skills of the individual completely. Speaking broadly about the corporate world, do you think that, much like greenwashing, diversity washing is also a significant issue? And do you think that some minority groups, the people in those, feel as though they have this extra layer of pressure to combat narratives like this?
That's a very good question. And I can't speak for anything else, but the cynic in me, absolutely thinks. I think, like, diversity was like a real hot topic, I think, in like 2018. It was the hot word. It was the greenwashing of 2018, and it was everywhere. And it's a very hard concept for me to, I guess, kind of pat the industry on the back for being like, oh, we want to increase diversity. I'm like, that's my life. Like, I hang out with people who look different all the time. I like, what does that mean? How does that translate into, your vision, your objectives? Like, diversity for the sake of it feels very performative, and you can snuff it out a mile away. And again, it can be very easy and very isolating to kind of carry that weight on you personally. And I have been in situations where I've felt that way. I've felt very frustrated by that. I haven't been exactly myself in the way that I engage with people, and I've been super frustrated. And I'm also resigned to the fact that it's not something I won't deal with to some extent, probably for the rest of my career, I would say. And yeah, I think it does get bandied around a lot. But it's not to say that I think the efforts from organizations to try to do the right thing are a waste of time. I don't think that at all. I think there's a little bit, for me, and just this is my personal experience, I think there's a lot of tiptoeing around and wanting to make sure we do the exact right thing that kind of stifles progress and stifles investment into those initiatives and, moving things along, because people are so worried about being politically incorrect and fucking something up. Oh, sorry. Like, so worried about getting it wrong and so worried about how it makes them look, instead of just wearing it, instead of just being like, okay, let's get the ball rolling on this. Let's try something. And also being open to the criticism that comes with doing something wrong. It's so, like, people get so defensive. And like I said in, my previous answer around not assuming you don't have blind spots, is that, like, it's almost easier to have a conversation with somebody who's completely foreign to me, who I don't know is very, very far right, because I know exactly where they stand. I think I've shared this before with people, but sometimes the hardest people to engage with on these topics are people who think they're all good. And I don't think this of you or of all of you, but sometimes I've had very difficult engagement with Pākehā women, because I always worry there's an internal voice and an internal kind of worry that when the going gets tough, will you lean into your womanhood or will you lean into your whiteness? And I've had situations where, when it has been tough, they've leant that way, and they've leant toward the comfort instead of kind of standing with their sisterhood, if I could explain it that right. That hasn't been the case for everyone. I've had some incredible Pākehā women, Pākehā champions who've supported me and who really recognise that. But yeah, the diversity thing, I think the conversation has moved along. I think the critique of it is warranted. People have just got to wear it, and people just have to be open to that. It's not going to be easy conversation. It's not going to be sunshines and rainbows. I'm not going to give people flowers because they've increased diversity at the firm by having more summer clerks who are diverse when your partnership is still completely white men. Something's got to shift. And I'm not happy to just kind of sit there and wait for 50 years time when we hopefully cycle through. It's not something I'll ever be comfortable with. So I think people just gotta get out of their own way, put the ego aside, and just be like, if we really want to do this, let's do it properly.
Yeah, it's definitely a really important and difficult skill for people to learn, to just swallow their pride when they have tried something and made a mistake, and we just need to learn from it and then try again.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said before, I'm like, your sorries to me just don't, like, thank you, great, thank you. Like, it makes you feel better, and then you go back to do your work, and I go back to do my work. But what are you going to do with it? What actions are you going to take? So, yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah. And so outside of your role as a lawyer, your involvement on boards and volunteering is really diverse. And just to name a few, you have been on the Auckland Young Lawyers Committee, the Pacific Lawyers Association, the Mother Project, just to name a few. There were plenty more. What motivated you, to seek out these opportunities or say yes when they arose?
Yeah, I think the volunteering stuff, like, honestly, if it started from anywhere, it started from my mum and my grandma. My mum she's a nurse. She's always thinking about people other than herself. My grandma is, they're just women of service. That's been my entire life. I've seen them give their time and invest their energy and their love and their resource into others, into their family, into people, and that's, I guess, really shaped why I got into volunteering in the first place. It's an odd one because you never get into it because you're wanting to get accolades or anything like that. It's just kind of, and I don't even want to say it's a cultural thing. It is, like, it's just part of my values that it's important for me to give back. So I'm in a position to do so. I've been taught, and I would feel really not like myself not to be invested in those roles. So when I started at Auckland Council, they told me about the Mothers Project, which is an initiative of the Who Did You Help Today Trust, where they take female lawyers into women's prisons, and we kind of help mothers connect with their children. And there are thousands of imprisoned mothers and mothers who don't know where their children are, who don't know who has care of their children. And so many of the questions are just like, could you just let me know where they are, who's got them? There are women who've got arrested, put into remand, and you can't take a cell phone or anything like that. So that's been a really empowering and enriching experience, and in some ways connected me to, actually, that was my first interaction with my now partner that I work for at Minters, Stacey, who's the founder of the trust. But yeah, volunteering has just been something that I can't imagine not doing. It would feel very odd not to do that. It'd feel out of step with my values, with my character, with what I've been taught, with the lessons that I've been taught from the people who've loved me. And then in terms of, I guess, the governance side of things, which I forget is also volunteering. Like, there's so much of your time that you commit to it. Governance was one of those things that I think a friend of mine, again, tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, there's this kind of cool opportunity at a regional sports trust that you might enjoy. They're looking for somebody who has, connections into the Pacific community, has a legal background, young woman. So it kind of fit. Had no idea what to expect, but I did like the idea of going into governance and doing things like setting strategy and, long-term plans and envision, and which, I'm a litigation lawyer. We often are, ambulance at the end of the tunnel. A lot of our reflections are kind of, in hindsight, this could have been better dealt with by X, or so I really enjoy, I guess, the ability to collaborate with people, again, who don't think like myself, who come from different walks of life, to set a strategy for an organization for whatever it is, and see how that kind of filters through and progresses the organization forward. And I've loved my governance experience. It's been really interesting because, I think as a lawyer, you feel like you kind of need to know all the answers. And I think as a governor, you sit there and you ask all the questions. And sometimes my silly questions, which I think are silly, are actually the questions that the people around the table are going like, we hadn't thought of that, or actually that's a good point, and I have the same reflections when they share their questions, which they probably think are silly too. So I really love that interaction. I think there's so much power around the board table. I don't know if governance was ever something that I heard about at uni or was ever promoted to me as a potential career. And it's definitely something I want to continue pursuing, and would encourage a lot more young people to kind of put their hand up, because your voice is really important at those tables. And I don't really think people understand the impact of what happens, the decisions that are made in those spaces and how that trickles down to people on the ground. So yeah, one I would encourage people to do if they were kind of thinking about it. There's plenty of great resources out there and plenty of good governors that you could reach out to for mentors as well. So yeah, couldn't speak highly enough about it.
Yeah, I think it's something you're seeing now more than ever. Everyone's looking for younger people to join boards just to broaden the perspective on the board, which I think is really cool, because there's such a difference between the perspective of a lot of board members who perhaps are in their 60s or 70s and people at the start of their career.
Yeah.
There's like a lot has happened in that time frame in the world. That
1,000%. And if you're sitting on a board where there's 5 people who come from the same background, who've done the same thing for 60 years, then 4 of them are unnecessary. Like, it doesn't make sense. And we were talking about diversity before. Like, it leads to better outcomes. It does. There's science there. There's research to back it. I can't reference it for you right now, but it's so important that there are different voices in those spaces, because like I said, you're asking questions that people haven't thought about. It probably weren't even there to be asked 10 years ago. So would highly encourage people to get involved.
I think there'll be a lot of lawyers listening, and if we suggest to them that they should take on more volunteering roles or extracurricular activities, they'll be thinking, how do you expect me to do this? I already don't have any time. So how have you gone about balancing your legal career and volunteering and your personal well-being as well? I imagine it's quite the balancing act.
That is a very good question. And I will start by saying that I'm not the best at it all the time. There are times where I'm super organized, I've got my life together, got my schedule planned, and there are times where it's all a shambles. I think you've just got to take that in your stride. If there's one thing if people, who wanted to get involved into volunteering, or, a bit worried about how that, works out with time and stuff, I think just start with one, see how that feeds into your life, and do that one well, and see how much you enjoyed in that space. But in terms of how I manage it with my well-being, I think I said at the start of our this kind of discussion, you've got to be very intentional about your boundaries. I think maybe in years past I probably wasn't as good about that. I'm also somebody who I think is pretty good at recognizing when my tank is running a little bit empty. And so one of the things, and I think one of the things that my mentor encouraged me to do from a well-being perspective is, say you've got a big project on, whether that's at work or, extracurriculars, book in kind of a prize or some kind of little celebration at the end of it, whether it's to go get your nails done or get your hair done or go get a massage. Like, book that in the same time you put in your project into your calendar, and carve that out in the way that you would carve out an important meeting. And taking those little wins along the way, taking those little breaks, I think goes a really long way in sort of keeping that cup filled up. There are also times when you have to recognize when to accept help, and that's a big one for me. I think it's a syndrome of being an only child, but you're recognizing that actually you kind of have to let go of control and let people help you. I'm thinking of this, like a video I saw last night where I think it was like a woman saying, when you're so grateful when your boyfriend cleans the house but they're not doing it properly, that's the reaction I have when I have people wanting to help me. I'm like, oh, they're not doing it right. But sometimes you just have to, and you have to allow people to reach out and reach in. So that's another one, is accepting help. And I think I touched on it a little bit earlier. I say this kind of jokingly almost every other day, but it's not actually a joke. I say, I'm not saving lives. I go to work and I tap away on my laptop for however many hours, and then I go home. It's such a short life to be miserable about. It's such a short life to sweat the small stuff, to take yourself so seriously. I don't think enough people talk about having fun and how important that is to having a sustainable career or a sustainable whatever, because there should be aspects of it that are fun, because for as many days that you will have laughing and enjoying your clients or your time, you'll have your busy days, you'll have your long projects or your trials or things that'll take you out for weeks on end. But when it's good, enjoy it. Life's not that serious. Law is not that serious, even though it seems that way. Not everybody is like that. You don't have to shape yourself into that kind of lawyer if that's not who you are. So yeah, just take everything with a grain of salt. I think it's also kind of a remnant of getting a little bit older as well. I'm just like, yeah, it's not that deep half the time. Things will be right. Again, we're not saving lives.
That's true. Yeah, so thanks so much for joining us. Before we finish the episode, we're going to ask you some quick fire questions. So I'll ask you a question and then you just say the first thing that comes to mind in a sentence or two. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So firstly, who do you look up to the most and why?
I look up to the most my mum, for sure. Yeah. She's very much a proponent of tough love, but for the longest time it was just her and I have so much admiration and respect for her, and it's so cliche, but I just couldn't imagine being who I am now without having her impact on my life. So yeah, her for sure.
If you could change one thing about the law right now, what would it be?
If I could change one thing about the law, I would... Oh, this is controversial, but I think I would get rid of like the billable hour. Don't tell my boss. Although I think she would agree too, but I don't think Jordan Cole would agree. But yeah, no, I just think there are just way more efficient ways of doing that kind of stuff. But again, this is probably just from my girl math brain, so yeah, I'll get rid of that.
That's actually funny. One of our previous guests, Hayden Wilson, said something pretty similar.
I just think I understand why it happened. I just think it's inefficient. It's more admin than it's worth. And I think, and not even just law, I think relationships are so important, and relationships between you and clients are so important. And if that's our strength, then you should be able to set some parameters at the start, or have a conversation about broadening that scope if necessary. But every hour, like every minute, every day, I went away. I'm going off on a tangent, but I was overseas in Taiwan with a group of people, and I was there with an engineer. He's a Fulbright scholar, like incredible, like so smart. He's been doing this whole his life, and I was explaining to him like, no, I actually have to, like, I put on little timers for everything that I do every day, and he's like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, yeah, like I know what a 30-minute job looks like. I know how much that, like, to the minute. And his mind was blown. I'm like, he's a Fulbright engineering scholar, genius from I don't know where, and even he thinks that's ridiculous. So I reckon it needs to go.
I definitely think it's like a pretty crazy concept in most other professions.
Yeah.
If you could recommend one book or podcast, what would it be?
Ooh, if I could recommend one book or podcast, I was going to say the High Court Rules, because one of the partners in the firm, in my team, he'll always, like, if you ever come to him with a question, he'll be like, have you read the High Court Rules? And you'd be surprised, or I was, which is terrible. I shouldn't say that as a litigation lawyer, but there's a lot of answers in the High Court Rules. It sounds ridiculous. So no, that's a joke. I'm a very music person, so maybe I'll just recommend a song. I've been listening to Alan Stone a lot because he was just in Wellington. So anything Alan Stone is a good shout.
That's great. I would definitely hold on to that. What's your go-to takeaway when you have like a big day at work?
Oh, at the moment, anything Vietnamese is just speaking my language. Any like spicy, soupy noodle, it's all I want. And I'm very much the kind of person, like, I don't know about you, but if I get into a food, that's all I want for like 4 months, and then I'll be completely turned off in 4 months and get on to the next one. So at the moment, it's Vietnamese, yeah.
Awesome. That's definitely like a long-term go-to for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks so much for coming on to the File Notes podcast. And yeah, it's been a super interesting discussion. If people want to get in touch with you or follow up with you, where should they go?
Yeah. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. Otherwise, feel free to email me and I'll be in touch. But you know where to find me.
Thanks so much, Maria. It was great to chat to you.
Awesome. Lovely to meet you both.
You too. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of File Notes. To keep up with the latest episodes and content, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube at File Notes Podcast. You can also visit us on our website at vxt.co.nz/podcast/file notes to subscribe to our email list and never miss an episode. That's vxt.co.nz/podcasts/file notes. See you there.